Let's face it, most people would probably think the daughter of one of the world's biggest rock stars and his ex-Playboy Playmate wife would be a typical Hollywood offspring. She'd be living life in the fast lane and a frequent tabloid topic. In the case of our next guest, nothing could be further from the truth. She learned about working hard and giving back firsthand from dad, Gene Simmons, and mom, Shannon Tweed. Sophie Tweed-Simmons is the antithesis of a showbiz kid. She encourages girls and women to reject unrealistic media portrayals of women and to accept and love their bodies. She's also outspoken about embracing her own flaws and imperfections, which I haven't found any yet. She's actively involved with a Canadian organization that helps children victimized by sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. She's so involved that the place bears her name. Here to tell us about Sophie's Place and the services it provides, as well as everything else she's up to these days, is Sophie Tweed-Simmons. Thanks so much for coming in.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My ribs are still hurting from talking to your dad. He's a very funny but very candid man. But he also has this kind heart, which is on display in the interview. Your mother as well. Talk to me about philanthropy, how important it is in your household and what you learned from them.
I think it was actually my mom and I who got our family into philanthropy. We started off with, AIDS walks and breast cancer walks when I was a kid, and then it kind of evolved into me going into programs where I would live in other countries and work in orphanages, and my mom got very involved in breast cancer and the SPCA, and then we kind of dragged my brother and my dad in and said, we're volunteering, you kind of have to do it with us. And then as soon as you volunteer one time, you understand what it's about and you understand why your time and your money and your resources are important to everyone else.
What is it about to you?
It's about giving back. We're born, especially in America, even the people in America who aren't so well blessed as you and I, are better off than most of the world. And I think a lot of people are so focused on, oh, woe is me, that they don't see the bigger picture and they don't see what the small things they could be doing to give back.
The touchstone for your dad in the interview is his mom and what she went through and what an impact she had on him. And I thought it was so telling. He said, I never did drugs, I never did alcohol, I never wanted to do anything that would besmirch this image for my mom. She meant that much to him. And I've heard you say you don't do drugs, no alcohol. Is that because of your parents? Do you think it goes back another generation? Talk to me about that, because it's interesting.
I don't know. I grew up reading the tabloids, I think, from a different perspective. They were taking pictures of our family and we were in them. So it was different than kids who just read about these partying ways and think it's just a good time and you go to rehab and that's normal. It's not normal. It's very abnormal and it's not appropriate behavior, I think. I think rehab is a last-ditch resort for people who really have troubles with addiction. And right now it's being idolized as like the go-to for young Hollywood, and it's not how it should be. So growing up, I saw the other side of the tabloids and, the terrible aspect of what those kids are going through. And a lot of my friends in high school went through it, and it was hard to see. My best friend that I've known since I was 3 is 7 years sober, and she's 23 years old.
Jeez, how does it happen? Do you think does it get back to what you were saying earlier, that there's just an abundance and perhaps that's a big piece of it? Or?
It is. I think a big piece of it is it's shoved in your face. People are trying to appear more mature than they are. But a lot of it stems from family issues, I would think. I know for my best friend, it was, she didn't have emotional support growing up. She didn't know where to turn when she had problems. So she turned to her friends who were very into drinking, and that was her outlet.
You were talking about going off and kind of dragging your dad and brother along, you and your mom, but going away outside the United States and living with so much abundance growing up and seeing how other people were living, how did that affect you?
I think the first place I lived was Uruguay when I was 14, and I went by myself and I lived with a woman there, Camilla, and she was incredible, and we didn't speak the same language, and it was just all about learning what her life was like and her teaching me, this is how you live here, this is how you make money. And then I go to work at the orphanage and then I come home and there was no luxury and there was no extras. And then coming back to my seemingly now big room that was just all mine, that I didn't have to share, was unreal, and you feel like a sense of guilt. And I'm not saying that people should feel guilty, I'm just saying that they should see other perspectives of life. I've lived in 7 different countries, and I've seen life lived a million different ways. And so now when I come back to America every time, I can appreciate what I have.
Sophie's Place, I saw online the video, the opening, and just how emotional you were. Walk me up to that moment, and what was going through your mind when you were addressing those people and choking back tears?
It's such an emotional process to be that invested in something that you care about and to see it come to life. And what was most important for me and the mayor of Surrey at the time, Diane Watts, was that these kids had a place they could go to be taken seriously. A lot of times when kids go through mental, physical, sexual abuse, they're carted around to, the hospital, the police, their lawyers. They have to tell their story to these adults, and it's super intimidating. And a lot of times they feel a sense of shame and embarrassment for what's happened to them, and then justice doesn't get served because they don't feel comfortable telling their story. And a lot of that is, unfortunately, the way adults talk to children, and they talk down to them. And so we made a place where all of those resources come together, the RCMP, the firefighters, the lawyers, everything comes to our center, to the children, and everything is about them from the moment they step in the door. And they have the same caseworker until they leave. And they're always welcome to come back, and it's a safe place that's open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
So how do you stitch together something like that? I mean, how does somebody like yourself know that that's what's needed? And it's obvious that that's what's needed, but sometimes the obvious stuff isn't always that obvious.
I think working in orphanages abroad, I saw that most of the children that came to the orphanage at an older age were children who had been abused, who had been taken away from their families, not so much given up. So I came back to America thinking, I drive around Los Angeles every day, but I've never seen an orphanage. I've never seen, the process for that. And it's really something that's just not talked about, especially in America and in Canada. It's a topic people don't feel comfortable discussing, but it's something that happens in every city. So starting a place that kind of goes against that negative image of child abuse and says, yes, child abuse is terrible and it happens, but here's your solution, and it's right here and it's in your face, and you can't avoid that. There's a way that we can help you.
And it's needed too, isn't it? I mean, it's so tough for these kids, because you talked about this, and I've heard others tell me this as well. You were talking about how they're talked down to. I mean, it's how they're treated along the way can be so difficult. Police officers asking them these really tough questions, they're embarrassed by it. All of these things are so needed, and yet it seems like, for whatever reason, the system doesn't understand that. The system in many ways fails them, doesn't it?
It really does, and I think just because there's so many different hands in the pot that have to deal with child abuse cases. There's, the police department, your lawyers, there's the doctors, there's just so many different people that have to be brought in to deal with one case, that they don't communicate with each other, and they get frustrated that they don't have all the details from all the other hands, and they're just not working together properly. So what we've done is created a place where these people have offices in our center, and it's as easy as walking over to someone and asking the detail, as opposed to going through all the legal stuff of, requesting details from the police officer and just getting that whole process going. It's a waste of time, and it's impeding results.
In the introduction, which I think you may have heard, we mentioned that you're involved in helping with body image, and you and I had a chance to chat before we started this about the book you're working on. So talk to me about that, and what got you interested in that subject matter as well.
I think just growing up in a family that was kind of under the microscope, growing up on reality TV, you see all of your awkward phases laid out before you, just one right after the other every season. And you just learn to be okay with it, because, you're saying, well, crap, I don't look good there. Like, why did I wear sweatpants that day? And you go, because that's me, and I wanted to. And people are seeing that without filter, and that kind of helps you accept who you are. At least for me it did. I know that's not the case for everyone on TV, but for me it was just like a real perspective turn, and I could just see myself for who I was and say, that's what I look like, and that is okay.
What do you think the message is, though, from mass media and billboards and magazines towards young girls, and how is it distorting things and in a sense damaging them?
There's a very specific view on what beauty is now, and I know we like to think that there's like a wide variety of beauty, but the media only really portrays one, this idyllic, slender or maybe slightly curvy. And even then, if you're slightly curvy, you're considered curvy. You're not just considered beautiful. It's voluptuous, or it's exotic, or it's something different than the regular beauty. And it's all over magazines, and it's in music videos, and it's shoved in your face all the time from a very young age. And there's not, or at least when I was growing up, there wasn't an alternative really to these, idyllic women to look up to. And especially now with social media, everything is on such a close, relatable basis. You're looking at supermodels' day-to-day photos when you wake up in the morning, and that has an impact on how you live your life. But what girls have to realize is just because someone lives their life gym dedicated and only eats fruit doesn't mean that you have to do that.
Right.
We all have different body shapes. We're human, but we're all not all the same.
There was this movie that came out in 1998, The Truman Show. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think it's interesting because this guy's gliding through life thinking he's leading his life, but he's actually a TV show. Mm-hmm. And you weren't tricked into this, but you've kind of led, part of your life has been a TV show. How weird is that? And what was it like seeing that movie? And did you relate at all in any respect?
I did. I actually saw it recently for the first time. I was taking an existentialist class in college, and we watched it. And it was like the weirdest, most like come to reality moment where I was like, oh man, that's kind of like what we did, and that's kind of what we had to do, where like everyone was on kind of a schedule, and it was all worked out, and it was my life, but it was scheduled. And it was so weird to see Jim Carrey, at the end just be like, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's kind of what happened to us, is we like all got to the point in our lives where we were doing different things and we didn't have time, and we were all just like, we're not doing it anymore.
What kind of pressure does it create for a family, though, in some respects? I mean, and does it change how you would, like you said, okay, well, I was in sweats, that's what I would normally wear, but doesn't your life become somewhat skewed? I mean, there are cameras everywhere. Do you have to think differently, or?
I mean, I think in the beginning we were more cautious. I was 11 when we shot the pilot, so I had no idea, and I was just like being a kid, and it was normal for me to come home and to have these people in my house, and we had the same crew pretty much for 7 seasons, so it was like, we knew them, and they were at our birthdays, and we were at theirs, and it was normal. But I think our show was different than most reality shows in the aspect we didn't have hair and makeup people, and we didn't have like wardrobe people, and it was just like, okay, you're shooting tomorrow, just come ready, and you just some days don't want to, and come in a ponytail and sweatpants, and that was how you felt that day, and that's what you saw. So
it's interesting, though. I've met a couple of people who've said to me, I want to get my own reality TV show. And
don't do it.
But isn't it weird? I mean, you actually have people now. It used to be, maybe I want to be a star in a movie or whatever. Mm-hmm. But people want their own reality TV show. It's kind of weird, isn't it? We live in a weird time, don't we?
It's very strange, and now I think people are super interested in getting to know interesting individuals, but that doesn't mean that everyone should have a reality show. I think if you stand for something, you have something to say, I would be interested in watching your show, but there are some shows that are just, for pure entertainment, and they're mindless, and people are being silly for the sake of being silly, and that's great for some audiences, but I think we need a little more content.
But in some respects, it's given you a platform that you can leverage to do some really special things. We talked in the introduction that you're the antithesis of the Hollywood kid. And you are. But is that one of the benefits of having done it, that suddenly you may have a megaphone that others don't, that to really call attention to really important issues?
I think I have a bit of a social media following now, and I try to, on my social media, be super honest with everyone on there. Like, I posted my measurements and my weight because people asked, and why not? My life was on TV, so they know everything else. Like, they might as well know that too. And I think, especially now, stars on reality TV try to be so perfect and idyllic, and it's unrealistic. And I think they're, in a way, lying to their following about who they are, and when you should just be real. If you're going to do reality, just be you.
But somebody's watching this at home and saying, oh my God, she's got such a glamorous life, and yet we had a chance to talk, and it's airports, right? I mean, it's airports and meetings, right?
Yeah, my life on the day-to-day is like living out of a suitcase, flying to places to try to convince people that they should do something good with their resources, and I'm the person they should do it with. So it's a lot of schlepping and sweating and running through the airport, and it's not glamorous. Like, I don't have a hair and makeup team. I don't have a wardrobe person. Like, My best friend helped me organize my closet, but I don't think that counts.
No, that doesn't count. But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are thankful that you're schlepping and doing all of this because it's making a huge difference. What would you say to somebody watching this, perhaps as a family, looking at your family and how active you are? Obviously, some people don't have as much in terms of resources, but what would be your takeaway message to a family watching this broadcast about how they can make a difference?
I would say, the number one way to make a difference, and people don't like to hear it, is to give your money to an organization that you care about. But if you don't have the resource to do that, you could give your time. Or what also really helps is just spreading the word. If you're a kid and you can educate your class on something that you're passionate about, that makes a difference. That stays with your friends for a long time. I know a lot of my friends now work with Big Brother, Big Sister programs, and they didn't before. After hearing about my center, they felt compelled to work with children, and that's making a difference in a way by giving your time and your energy.
And that's that ripple effect that you probably never even saw or even thought of before you started.
No, I thought, we're going to make a center and we're going to make a difference in the kids we help, but I didn't understand that the people who heard about the center would feel compelled to do something.
Sophie, thanks so much for coming in and
Thank
spending
you.
the night. Tell your dad I said hello.
I will.
Coming up next, this week's full-frame close-up on a classic opera of little proportions.